Why the 2031 first-round pick should be untouchable for the Bucks, and thoughts on this year's NBA Finals coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined once again by Camille Davis and Frank Madden. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day, each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right. So where we left off on yesterday's show was the assets that the Bucks do have, namely, I suppose the two big ones with the 2032 as well, depending on how you divvy that up. But much has started to be made of that 2031 draft pick. Camille and I have talked about, I think you and I did once as well, Frank, the value of that and how that may well be the most valuable asset that is out there available right now, given the uncertainty, not even in the short term, but just where the Bucks figure to be in 2030 surrounding Giannis. I get, we'll just rip the Band-Aid off here. You've seen people, well, you chip in your 2031 and you can bring back this player. I don't know what player is available on the market that you could bring in that's going to be the Band-Aid that, okay, now you're back in that hunt. And with how much you've already kicked the can down the road, I just don't see any scenario where I'm entertaining trading that 2031 pick. What about you guys?
I wouldn't say no scenario, because sometimes guys come available. You didn't expect them to come available. And that type of pick could be interesting.
So
but
Bradley Beal waives his no trade. You're using that for him.
We're not speaking that evil, Ricky Bobby. We ain't going to do that here. But no, I think that there are certain younger players. For me, the 2031 draft pick, I've seen the Utah Jazz trade come up. David Lott from Locked On Jazz has mentioned it. We've seen it in the comments of our shows as well. For me, that draft pick is not a salary dump pick. That's a pick you use to acquire some type of talent that you believe could, at least have an all-star potential going forward. So I wouldn't say it's completely off the table. I do get the Bucks fans who are also yo, we literally have nothing. Why are we going to entertain putting this on the table as well? We're really going to be draft poor if we continue to go this route. But again, if Giannis stays, your window is open for only so long. So I can see situations where I'm willing to, but for me, my hard no comes in a salary dump. That's where I'm I do not want to do that.
It's
Camille, what are we all going to be in 2031?
Oh, well, Courtney, we ain't going to be here. So
we're all going to be dead. So it's fine.
I mean, you're taking out a third mortgage on a house that's in a neighborhood where a hurricane has hit each of the last 2 years, basically.
That's a good metaphor. I like that, Justin. Depressing as hell, but a good metaphor. As someone who lost power for 5 days after a really bad storm last week, it's hitting a little too close to home. So I think that this is one of the most interesting things. I would love to be a fly on the wall for when John Horst and Giannis have their, summit or whatever. Because one of the questions I've got on my list if I'm Giannis is, are we putting that 2031 pick into play, and what can we get for it?
Yeah.
And if I'm John Horst, my starting point would be, I hope he doesn't ask that. For the reason,
say, well, we tried, but nobody's interested in it.
Yeah. They think you're going to be here and we're just going to be too good in 2030, Giannis. So it's just not worth a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, I would just be really curious to know how they frame their approach to that to Giannis, because Giannis and Alex Saratzis and his Octagon team, I'm sure, look at the situation and say, well, if you want us to stay, the best way to give me a team that can compete is to cash in that chip, because if you're Giannis, who cares about 2031? You want to obviously make the most of your prime. So yeah, I think Bucks can't hide from that question forever. They're going to have to probably answer that question to Giannis at a minimum. And then we'll see. But Well, let me just clarify something, because there was that like random Jazz trade idea that I saw floating around, but that was like from like a Jazz fan site. It was, basically it was like Dame's contract plus the 2031.
David Locke that started it.
David Locke started it.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize
I've
that.
seen different iterations of it since Locke brought it up, but like the first person I heard mention it was David Locke.
So basically it was Colin Sexton, John Collins for Dame plus the 2031. That was like the basic framework, right?
Yeah. And was Clarkson in there too? Or
it was a couple different ways you could.
Clarkson was in there too.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, it is like essentially here's a bunch of like, solid to good rotation guys to give you ammo to keep Giannis happy for, the next year or two at least. And obviously Sexton is still pretty young. Collins is in his prime, and Clarkson obviously less so, but whatever. First off, I was surprised because I feel like I'm so used to like opposing fan bases and people from other teams like just offering like nothing for Giannis in hypothetical trade deals, like the Raptors, like Doug Smith from the Raptors, who I have no ill will against. Doug Smith, seems like a very respectable journalist, but like was answering questions about the Raptors' interest in Giannis, and like first off, in his response, does not mention Scotty Barnes at all.
No,
which is just
that's
like
a non-starter.
Clearly, like first off, those two guys don't make any sense playing together. They're like play the same position. They're both dominant on ball, non-shooters, whatever.
Not great shooters. Yeah.
Like clearly that would be the guy the Bucks would start with and ask, but like doesn't even mention him, but then talks about how like maybe you're deep enough you can give up two of like, RJ Barrett and Ochai Agbaji and Jonathan Mogbo. And it's just like, and I tweeted out sarcastically, like, oh wow, like thank you for being willing.
We'll give you Ochai and Grady Dick, but it's Giannis and the 2031 first.
So I'm like very cynical, and like Rockets fans like, think like, oh, we can't give up, like Cam Whitmore, like in a Giannis, we can't get whatever. So I'm like very like annoyed in general about, that. And this is like obviously always the Cold War. It's like Bucks fans think the other team should give up, their entire franchise for Giannis. Those teams think like, well, I won't Giannis if I get him for basically nothing. So I respected that, like the David Locke offer, and I didn't realize he was using David Locke. So shout out to David that he actually like offered the Bucks a bunch of stuff at least for the 2031 pick. And I do not view that as a salary dump. I mean, Dame's probably, I don't want to say toast, but like we're not getting the old Dame Lillard back in 2 years, year and a half, whatever it is, right? It's some diminished version of that, right? And yeah, like that's the problem. Like you guys hinted at it, like Colin Sexton is probably never going to be an all-star. Like maybe there's some version of the world, maybe, but probably not. John Collins, we know, is not that. And obviously Jordan Clarkson is, like a gunner, inefficient guy whose best days are behind him. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just, to me, that's like a great litmus test of like, if I'm Giannis, I'd say like, look at that Jazz thing. Would you do that? Like, is that of interest, or what would you actually, show me a deal that you would do, give up the 2031 pick for that is, not ridiculous. And yeah, it's hard to say because it's probably, young guys who are flawed or, not guys that you would look at as ever being like the second banana behind Giannis on a title contending team. But I don't know. I mean, I still think we're all, like trying to like look for like the kind of takeaways from this playoffs. Like, is there something that we're learning from what the Pacers have done and the Knicks have done, etc.? I don't know. The Thunder necessarily teach us a whole lot because they're a little bit different. Yeah, draft well. But I mean, George. Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
Pacers could say that too.
Yeah, but I think like the main takeaway people are saying is like, well, you don't need like 2 or 3 superstars. You need a superstar, and then you need like really well-fitting pieces, good coaching, and depth around them. And so again, like, what is the version of that for the Milwaukee Bucks this summer? And is there something with the 2031 pick that you'd actually be willing to do? Again, like if I had a great answer, I mean, I think probably something I'll think more about. And if we knew Giannis was definitely staying, I'd probably invest a little more time in it. But again, I'm still defaulting to Giannis staying, so probably an interesting question to continue to think through a little bit over the next few weeks. But shout out to David for at least offering something that is, not garbage for the 2031 pick. And again, sorry to Dame, but like, you're at least for the next year, obviously, basically 54 million of salary dead weight, and beyond that, tough to say.
I mean, and Locke did have a version of that trade too, where it was Lauri Markkanen coming in this Dame trade, where it was like Lauri Markkanen, Clarkson for Dame, Connaughton, and Tyler Smith. But with that one, he wanted a lot of Bucks.
Tyler Smith? No, that's where we draw the line.
But it was a lot of Bucks draft capital have to go in there. Like every remaining piece that they had, he would want back in that particular trade too. So
I think the problem is like Lowry just isn't a good enough fit for me with Giannis, Like, I mean, for other teams
last year too.
Yeah. I mean, for other teams, like I could maybe see it. But he's not defending centers. So then you're in like this weird spot. Like, is he playing the 3? And
it's really like a 3 in my opinion.
So to be honest, like if you were doing something like that, like I would then ask like, well, is there some 3-way version of a trade where Lauri Markkanen goes elsewhere and you get something that makes more sense coming to Milwaukee? But I don't know. I mean, it's at least I think an interesting talking point, right? To think through, like, again, what is that version? So open to our listeners, viewers, readers, whatever other sensory methods you can use. But what is your tweet at us, leave a comment, whatever. What is kind of the version of a 2031 pick trade that you think is plausible and actually would be worth doing? And again, assuming Giannis is back.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the two teams, so we'll take a look at the NBA Finals coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night has been delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. You've got player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Thinking about which players are going to show up in the biggest moments, especially in the biggest games with the NBA Finals here, or how could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? If you've got a read on that and who's heating up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? How could $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet wins? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we are obviously recording this before the finals have been played here, but we've got the highly anticipated matchup between the Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. I'm assuming you would pick the Thunder to win this series, Frank?
I don't like, well, this is not, I don't think this is exactly where we're going. So I obviously want the Thunder to win. I have a couple of my best friends from college are from Oklahoma, so they have some affinity for the Thunder. Likeable team, like in many ways, right? And perhaps most importantly, the other team is the Indiana Pacers, and I cannot root for the Indiana Pacers. So I'm going to be rooting for the Thunder. The Thunder should win the series, but after everything we've seen from the Pacers, and nothing would surprise me, right? I mean, they are the ultimate cockroaches. You think they're dead, they don't die. You're going to have to kill them with fire, basically, to beat that Pacers team. And I think the Thunder, do have the flamethrowers to kill these cockroaches and actually beat the Pacers, and I think they should. But would anybody be shocked if the Pacers come out and surprise the Thunder in game 1, and then now they have home court, and the Thunder are also a young team that is not as battle tested as obviously other kind of wannabe champions have been. So nothing would shock me, but yeah, do I expect the Thunder to win? I think they will, but I also want to be careful I don't get too overconfident as someone who wants them to win.
I think the Pacers are going to win. And a big part of it is I would pick the Pacers in the series because I would much rather be wrong in thinking that I would rather be wrong in not the sense of not giving the Pacers a chance, opposed to, well, it's going to take fewer games than we thought from the Thunder to win this series. And that's kind of, everybody seems to be coming down to Thunder in 5. But the points you made about, look at the wins the Pacers have had. I mean, the Thunder, to be fair, I was pretty critical of them at times in the playoffs. They answered a lot of questions in the last 2 rounds of the playoffs. If you question their half-court offense and can they show up in the biggest moments against that competition, they showed they can. But that's what this Pacers team has showed for a couple of years now, for 2 playoff runs, and they've just had a knack for coming up big in the biggest moments. The interesting part is a lot has been made of, well, this Pacers team, they use their pace to their advantage, and they're not really going to be able to do that against the Thunder. But I don't know. I mean, I think some of the same can be said for Oklahoma City, of how they're going to be able to pressure the ball. And like, well, Indiana, they're used to this, and this is how they play. So I think it's going to be a good series here, but I'm also curious, what's the big overreaction to come from this series when we talk about a reactionary league and how teams look to build out their teams? I mean, you mentioned one of them, Frank, and I don't think this is an overreaction in this sense. It's no longer a super team league, but that's the big one that you're taking out of it, is like, well, teams are going to say we're not building with multiple superstars. We're just building with guys. But there's going to be something else that comes from this, whether it's every team is going to start to pressure the ball the full length of the floor. You need multiple ball handlers. I'm just curious, Camille, your thoughts. What's the big overreaction to come from this series?
I think we have already gotten there. Like, I've already seen so many different national podcasts talking about how the superstar era is over, which I agree with. I don't think that's an overreaction necessarily, but I think that's also more so something that's coming from how teams are going to have to be built going forward with the new CBA and how restrictive it is once you hit that second apron going forward. But with this matchup with the Thunder and the Pacers, I'm going Thunder in 6 in this one. And I was going back and forth, but I was like, I don't want to overthink this, because I feel like I overthought the Eastern Conference Finals and picked the Knicks because I talked myself into it, rather than looking at what we had seen transpire over the playoffs. And I think one thing for the Pacers in this series that's going to be maybe a shock to their system, this is going to be the best defense that they have gone up against. Like, this Thunder's defense has been historic throughout the season. They're going to kind of Spider-Man meme it a little bit of like, oh, you like to pressure full court? So do we. You want to play fast? So can we. You don't turn the ball over? We don't either. You want to run for the turnovers? So do we. So it's like, which team can execute that at a higher level? And I just have a little bit more confidence in the Thunder's pieces being able to do that at a more consistent level. And I also think, too, because of a little bit of a lack of rim protection for the Pacers, SGA, the way that he likes to orchestrate that offense, like if he can get those paint touches and spray out, Thunder players can knock down those shots. Like, it's going to be rolling for the Thunder. And I think it's one of those series for the Pacers where they're going to have to play their best basketball. Like, they cannot have miscues against this Thunder team because they will take advantage of it. But all in all, you know, all the conversation about like the small markets and how this is terrible. Like, if we didn't spend enough time talking about the market and just the basketball, I think more people would be excited for this one, because I think the 2 best teams that we saw in the playoffs made it here. And I think that series against the Nuggets for the Thunder was needed for them to get to this point of like, okay, a little bit more professional, a little bit grown up.
The Bucks Nets series, basically.
Exactly. Like, this was the series they needed to like really harden them and get them ready. So yeah, I'm going Thunder in 6 in this one.
Also, just like looking at, I mean, we saw it in the first round series. It was, you know, like from the Bucks side, it was like, are the Pacers going to have like a bad shooting game at some point? You know, we saw it a year ago. They beat the Bucks without shooting the well from 3 in that playoff series. This year, the Pacers lead the NBA playoffs in 3-point shooting. They're at almost 41%. They're about 4% above their regular season mark. It was about a little over 36%. Meanwhile, the Thunder are at 33.6% in the playoffs, which is about 4% under their season 3-point percentage mark. So, you know, I think that sort of speaks to the Thunder having a more malleable, and obviously just their defense, as you guys alluded to, they have a more, I think, more malleable offense, and they have, I think, a defense that just gives them more degrees of freedom, right? Like they can have a bad offensive night and the defense can just be so suffocating that you just can't do anything in the paint. And the Pacers probably need to continue to shoot, 40% plus from three to beat this team. And honestly, we saw it in the Bucks games against the Thunder this year too. There were only 2 real games, obviously, because the one in Oklahoma City, the Bucks didn't play anybody. But it is just so hard to get anything going inside. And it's like, even in the NBA Cup game that the Bucks won, and that was one of the best defensive performances against Giannis that any team had strung together. Like, people were like, oh, why did they do this or that against Giannis? He scored 26 points on 18 or 19 shots, something like that. That's great defense against Giannis this year. Like, he had a triple-double. He was awesome. But Giannis didn't just plow through them, in that game, in that showout game. And, they really contained him well in the game in Milwaukee too. And so they just shrink the floor and just make it so hard. And, they just don't have the weak links that, I think you look at what the Pacers were able to do, against the Bucks, against the Knicks as well. They just, I think, had more opportunities to exploit the opponent, whether it was stylistically or in individual matchups. And I think, Rick Carlisle has just done a great job to sort of attacking those things. And I just think you look at the Thunder, I don't know who you really attack, right? I mean, if Shea's your weakest defender as a starter, that's tough, because it's not like, you're going to just abuse him and be able to do a ton of damage by going at him, because he's also at least an average to pretty good defender too. So,
or you try to hunt Chet.
But they don't really have the physical. I don't think they really have the physicality. I mean, Miles Turner doesn't want to
Tyrese Halliburton trying to get that big matchup of but even still, Chet's
Hartenstein. I mean, Hartenstein, probably would be the guy that you try to do, but then they obviously don't have to play Hartenstein, because they don't need to defend a Jokic type, like they did. So I just think they can just play different ways. And I think on paper, I think the Thunder obviously should be the favorites, but as you alluded to, Justin, I mean, also just coaching matchup, like Carlisle versus, Mark Daigneault, who has been a great coach, but he's a young coach as well. And we'll see, the fires they've gotten through here in these first 3 rounds. Have they now gotten the battle tested stuff out of the way, and now, they know how to do it? Or have they not beaten the final boss yet? And they still, aren't necessarily going to be able to figure that out. So, again, any series is always interesting for the chess match stuff. But we'll see. We've seen it, right? 3-point shooting and clutch plays have just made all the difference for the Pacers.
Yeah.
And, they've been an incredible road team. They have 1 loss on the road, 2 losses, Bucks, and 1 against the Knicks, I think.
Knicks, yeah.
In the playoffs. So, I mean, I think if you're Oklahoma City, you probably are feeling that pressure to win these first 2 games. Because if you let them get out to another 1-0 lead, if you're Indiana, then you're starting to feel like, oh, okay, this is what they do, and you're kind of falling into their trap again. But I'll be watching it for sure. And it's funny with you mentioned, Camille, just the league stuff and the ratings and all that. It's really funny, right? I mean, the league just signed a brand new TV contract.
Right.
None of this matters. None of the ratings really don't matter at all.
They will be bad, I think, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't actually matter to the league's revenues. I'm sure the TV partners would rather have an easier time selling ads and stuff, but that's okay. It at least on paper obviously should deliver. It's maybe some good games. Hopefully we'll see, but I certainly hope the Thunder can let's a competitive series is fine, but Thunder, just the NBA champion Indiana Pacers, nobody needs that.
we talked about the two teams that are in the finals, but their windows and the windows that we're seeing overall in this league, especially a lot has been made of the Eastern Conference team. So what's the shift that we've seen there? We'll tackle that and start to wrap things up after this on Locked On Bucks. So we, I mean, the three of us have talked about this outside of the show, but just everything the Celtics are facing this offseason, where it's funny that you have two camps of people, and the one that's like, well, we kind of, we're bracing for this for a couple of years, and the other that's like, hey, so Jason Tatum gets injured and now we got to tear down the team. Where it's like, no, you knew what you signed up for here. And I think the interesting part is the Celtics window was really starting 2-3 years ago when they reached the finals and should have won and should have beat the Warriors in that series. And now you've kind of started to hit the end of it. I mean, I think this league is a 3-year window go forward, that when you look at the setup of guys that are coming in, somebody else put out the comparison too of, is this the secret sauce? In the NFL, Camille, you talk about a rookie contract for your quarterback. Is this the rookie extension that you need your best player to be on, that you're still saving a little bit of money there? You're young enough and in your prime that those are the teams that are taking off. But I think the reality is it's really a 3-year window. And I mean, even the Thunder, it's last year was the start of it. This year, probably next year. And then after that, you got to pay Chet. You got to pay Jalen Williams. Shea's going to be due for the richest contract in league history. And they're going to have to start to potentially look at taking that team apart. They're in a better spot than most, and I would certainly much rather be in the Thunder spot than the spot the Bucks are in. But, I mean, it is interesting in that I still, Frank, question, other than the drug testing component, why did the players go for the CBA? Like, what am I missing here?
Well, we alluded to on the last podcast, right? Like the impact this has on kind of the rank and file non-star class. We've seen it the last few years, right? It's just a lot harder to get a lot fewer bad contracts, right? Which in the grand scheme of the universe, like that quote unquote bad contracts were in many ways like the ultimate sign of player empowerment and, a CBA that benefited players because guys didn't have to prove a whole lot or be, a top 3 caliber guy, also a caliber guy in order to get, these contracts, which, okay, now I'm, $25-30 million a year, maybe a little bit under that sort of with inflation previously, given how the cap has gone up. But yeah, I think it's a couple things. It's obviously the total value has gone down and also just the duration of these contracts, right? Yeah. Like you just don't see the long-term deals that people were getting, right? I mean, 2016 is the ultimate sort of funhouse mirror season, given the way the cap spiked. But, it's just like, it wasn't just that, Bismack Biyombo and Timothy Mozgov got whatever it was, like $16-18 million a year. It was, they got 4 years, right? They were getting the max years, max raises, Delly getting 4 years, I think it was, from the Bucks ultimately. Yeah, I mean, and it's just now the duration, Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue talk about years, not dollars, right? And a lot of times these contracts, they become problematic, not because just the dollar amount is really big, but, especially when it's an older player, the length of the contract just can become a problem. I always think back, do either of you remember Matt Carroll from the Charlotte Bobcats?
Hornets, small, yeah.
I think that was Bobcats, but he was basically like your white shooter guy, like great shooter guy, and had like one decent year. And then I think he got you can fact check me on this. I haven't looked it up, but he just sort of came to mind. I think he got like 5 years and 18 million, which of course now this is like, I think mid 2000s, I want to say, which of course now is like, 5 years, 18 million. Like how damaging can that be? But like within a year, I was like, oh, this guy's like fringe NBA rotation guy, but you've got him for another 4 years. And of course, nobody wants 4 years. Nobody wants to take on a 4-year contract, 3-year remaining contract, whatever it was, for a guy that like you don't want to have on an NBA basketball roster, whatever. So, like the Ron Baker contract, also one of the all-time bad contracts. Ron Baker got a player option from the Knicks like a 2-year, like a 1+ player option or something like that, and just immediately became trash after his like decent rookie year. So those are just the deals like I just don't think you don't really see those anymore because there's a lot more non-guaranteed money, fewer years, and obviously just anything above the mid-level is just generally reserved for guys that have really proven something, or like Max Strus is probably one of the best counter examples to this.
Yeah.
He got I forget what he got. Was it like 18 million a year or something like that from the Cavs? And again, but he needed like that big Heat run in the playoffs where the Cavs were able to buy in that like, damn, we want to pay whatever it is, $18 million a year or whatever for Max Strus. But the guy showed it in the playoffs, and not a lot of guys do that though, right? Like having a good regular season is no longer enough to have a team just kind of bet big money on you. And I think teams are just also getting smarter about realizing when they have leverage and, not just paying guys a ton of money when there's not going to be that external market for them. And I think that's certainly, for the Bucks, I think an interesting test case this summer with Bobby, right? Like, does Bobby test the market? Or does he opt out only as sort of like a wink, wink? I don't want to say wink, wink, but like as just sort of a like opt out and then we'll, give you more money type situation. Or he opts in and, he gets some sort of extension on top of that. But I would guess if he opts out and has a deal with the Bucks, it maybe for slightly less so they can save some money this year.
The two that I will always remember, and I mean, just in terms of the contract itself, not the value, I don't necessarily remember, but Ryan Anderson and the deal that he signed with Houston, where that almost immediately, and injuries were a part of it too.
Yeah.
But that just immediately became this is an albatross. Chandler Parsons, similar too, with injuries, the big piece there. But even then, like
even initially, that it was still like, what?
Yeah, we sure it's all injuries with Chandler Parsons, but what now I just blanked on his name, the old Heat backup undersized Tyler Johnson.
Yeah.
The deal that he signed that summer too, where it was, man, we got to figure out how to get rid of this Tyler Johnson contract. Like every team had one of those deals that you looked at and said, like, how do we get out from under this?
I think teams were also like, I think part of it too was teams got so wrapped up in not losing their guys. I think I think for a long time the league was really beholden to the can't lose a guy for nothing sort of complex. And also so I think that kind of manifested in a couple ways. Like I think you used to see teams would always pick up like the 2-player option or 2-team year options on like first round draft picks, even when they clearly were not going the direction that they wanted them to. And your own free agents, like teams just felt like, oh man, we got to pay this guy, right? Which is why I think like the Bradley Beal, that contract, like so many people immediately ripped that because it was like, you're not going anywhere. Like you don't have to do this. Like
and give him a no trade clause on top of that.
You don't have to do this. And I think that was much more common of a mindset back in the day was, and look at even the Bucks history, right? Like Mo Williams got a 6-year contract, if I remember correctly. And I think he had the ETO and player option combo, which you can't even do anymore because contracts can't be long enough to allow it. And I think I remember, it's funny. I remember meeting John Hammond for the first time must have been 2008, because that's when he joined. It was the Gilgeous-Alexander draft. Okay, not the best start for John, but I remember meeting him and just talking to him a little bit, and he made some comment about, he pointed that out, like, who the only other guys are that have a player option and an ETO, and he like listed off like a few superstars and Mo Williams, and then he said some other very folksy things like, gosh dang, like that was sort of like the way he would say, is like, God dang, you can't do that, so that was funny. Shout out to John Hammond, good dude. But yeah, I mean, so I think you just don't see that sort of thing anymore. And So it's just going to be interesting to see just kind of what direction this goes. I will say, I mean, the thing that the two teams in the finals have in common, you look at the Pacers, you look at the Thunder, they did spend money to keep
discussion again. No,
what's it? they did spend to extend a lot of their like kind of their guys, right? Sort of the proven rotation guys that they felt they could count on to be like those top 7 or 8 rotation guys, right? Nembhard, Obi Toppin, guys like that got paid, which, you know, a lot of what we're saying right now would say like, maybe you shouldn't pay those guys, you know, 15 to 18 million. I forgot what Toppin got. I think maybe a little less.
I think it was like 16. Yeah.
Okay. So something still in that ballpark. Those are actually not that common of deals. But I would also say, I don't think Obi Toppin gets $16 million a year if he goes to free agency today.
This summer. Yeah.
Nembhard probably could get close to that. I think at least a full mid-level deal. But the Thunder obviously as well, wrapping up like, you know, guys like Wiggins, Isaiah Joe for contracts that did they really need to sign those guys for those contracts? I don't know, maybe not. But, you know, by the same token, they had kind of a window with their cap where they could pay those guys the next couple of years. And it wasn't like, you know, now couldn't keep, you know, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren because of that or something of that nature. And they got them at deals where it's like, okay, those are aggregatable contracts and they should be movable if we do want to trade them or make other deals. And that's also another piece too, right? Like having contracts that are in that, you know, $6 to $10 million range. I mean, we saw like the Sixers do this last summer. They basically just paid, you know, like KJ Martin, like $8 million, not because they thought he was good, but because he was essentially the walking trade exception.
Yeah.
And I think there is a little bit of that calculus as well for the Bucks. And I've mentioned it previously with Brook Lopez. I mean, that's not a, you know, trivial reason why you would opt to keep Brook, because if he walks, you lose that salary slot. If you keep him, he's obviously, you're not giving him a 3-year contract at this point. So if it's a 1-year deal or whatever, then I mean, you'd have optionality to trade that, aggregate it later, especially given where you are now, having a more favorable cap position.
Leave your thoughts, your favorite contract from the summer of 2016, because there are some wild ones that are out there. The last
summer too.
Yeah, it was. I think he had a 5-year deal for well over.
I think it was Batum.
Oh, yeah. Batum, yeah. The like immediate regret contract for Nick Batum.
Well, and
who then like became a minimum guy and then became like,
and then all of a sudden
good value guy again, right? But it's like just it's so interesting how, you know, the perception of guys like from like when they're the overpaid guy, the franchise and the fans hate him, and then he becomes a minimum contract guy someplace else, and then like everybody likes him. You know, it's all context.
I mean, the last thing I'll say about this Pacers team, and it's just more to paint the picture of it's unavoidable for any team, basically, in that we already mentioned a couple of the names, but that cap sheet gets really interesting in a couple of years when you're looking at $16 million from Obi Toppin in a deal that goes up year over year. TJ McConnell they have locked up through 2027, 28, I believe, and he's $11 million.
Yeah.
It's going to be old, and that's
he may not be mortal. So
that's
I mean,
you know, to the point that we made about the Bucks point guards too, like that level of production you can probably get for in between the minimum and taxpayer mid level. So like that contract's going to be interesting, and the fact that, you know, Pascal Siakam's already over 31 years old, and you have him extended on the same timeline as Tyrese Halliburton for another 4 years after this, I think 28, 29. So another 3 years
27
after this.
Yeah.
So they're not immune to it either, where all of a sudden that's going to start to be an expensive and starting to get older team as well. And you know, we don't even know what's going to happen with Miles Turner and the contract that I would assume they give him, that he stays there. So it comes for every team is the point of the story here. That'll do it for today's show. Again, we're taping this in advance of game 1 of the finals. So Frank and Camille are probably going to look fine. I may look like an idiot, and the Thunder win this game 1 by 30 points. And it looks like, this is looking like this is going to be one of those sweeps here, but we'll see. That'll do it for the show and for the week. For Frank, for Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.